Welcome and thanks for joining us today for our Kentucky Spin Presents Empowering Conversations, How to Talk to Your Child About Their Disability with our Lunch and Learn. We're going to cover just a few housekeeping items before we jump right into the presentation today. I do want to let everyone know that there is a chat as well as a Q&A function located at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free during the presentation to utilize those if you have questions. When we do see those, we will pause for a moment and answer those to the best of our ability, as well as at the end of the presentation, if there are any other questions that have not been able to be answered. I also want to let you know, please take care of yourself. If you need to step away for a moment, information will be provided in the chat box with the material or resources that are covered today. If you're unable to grab those during the presentation, there will be an email that goes out with all of the links that were shared today within 24 hours following the training. A little bit about Kentucky SPIN, or Kentucky Special Parent Involvement Network. We are the Parent Training and Information Center in the state of Kentucky, funded by the U.S. Department of Education under IDEA since 1988, when Kentucky first received a PTI. Kentucky SPIN Parent Center provides training, information, and support for children and youth with all types of disabilities, birth through 26 years old, their parents, families, as well as professionals. We want to tell you what we do not do, as well as what we do. At Kentucky SPIN, we do not act as attorneys. We are not attorneys. We do not represent families. However, with that being said, we do empower families to advocate for themselves, for their children, and for family members or friends. By using a peer-to-peer model, we support families as well as professionals to access needed information and resources. A quick disclosure about the training today. This is not a training of trainers event. Kentucky SPIN does not authorize other agencies, organizations, or individuals to train this material. This presentation is for educational use only, and all rights are reserved for Kentucky SPIN Incorporated. Today's agenda, Eileen will be going over understanding emotions, why, when, research, and conversation. And at this time, I'm going to hand things over to Eileen so she can tell a little bit about herself before jumping into today's presentation.
Thank you, Amber. So, hi, my name is Eileen Hoover. I am the early childhood parent educator here at Kentucky SPIN, the Special Parent Involvement Network. I have 4 children, 3 of which have special needs, including ADHD, autism, cerebral palsy, medically complex care, G-tube, lots of different things. So this is not something that I just read about. This is something that I live. So I'm going to jump right into it. We're going to start off by saying that with this presentation, that overall there are no correct answers. There's no right way to start this conversation or have this conversation. So we aim to just empower you with the confidence and the knowledge to ensure this conversation is positive, impactful, and fosters an environment of openness and trust in your family. However, you decide to talk to your child about their disability is up to you as parent, grandparent, caregiver. There is no manuals for parenting, and there's definitely no manuals for parenting children with different disabilities and different special needs. So this presentation is just to be used as a guide of how you could talk to your child Because in the end, you decide the how, the why, and the when you speak to your child about their disability. So, understanding emotions. So, parental stress. Parents of children with disabilities report higher levels of stress than those without, meaning that when parents have children that have different disabilities, it is not just the normal wear and tear that every family has from parenting and having children. There's an additional level of stress added on top of it. It's important that you understand that that is a normal thing and that is okay, but it also can tell you about how how you're reacting to things because it's not what other families may be going through. You want to understand your reaction. Many parents go through a process of grieving after they get a disability diagnosis. It's important to know that this is normal and this is okay. That is a normal thing that happens in life when you're given a diagnosis that's going to essentially change or could potentially change the course of your life and how you think things were going to go. So, some emotions that parents do feel after diagnosis, there's a fear of the unknown, there's guilt, there's isolation, there's just straight grief. There's loss of hopes and dreams that you had for your child. Depression, anxiety are all different things that you can have and can be emotions that you have after having a disability diagnosis. It's important to know that they're okay, they're normal, and it's going to take time or an adjustment period to understand how you feel and understand how you're going to learn different positive coping strategies to deal with those emotions. You want to give yourself grace. It takes time to process your emotions, and that's just for yourself, not even talking about all the other people that are in your life that are dealing with a diagnosis. So when your child is diagnosed, it may make a difference in how you adjust. So the the research shows that parents who were given a diagnosis before birth, that sometimes they have time to cope and reassess expectations for your child. As opposed to parents who were given a diagnosis after birth, it may take longer for them to cope and adjust to the diagnosis. This doesn't mean that being told before birth or after birth makes a difference because your understanding of your emotions and how that takes a hold of you is absolutely valid. But when they talk about if you had time before birth or shortly after birth that you were told of a child's diagnosis, it may look different than if you have a child that is older and maybe had a traumatic brain injury. So they are different than the child they were before that happened. Or if there's a child that, as they get older, they get a diagnosis that sometimes that diagnosis makes parents or families feel like something has changed in their child. Sometimes people talk about that they may not have anticipated a child's developmental or behavioral problems or concerns. Having time to process, cope, and grieve and adjust is important. Is understanding when your child is diagnosed is also going to help you understand how your own feelings and emotions are and how you are handling those. As opposed to, before, after having that diagnosis, before birth, after birth, or wherever it is along in that child's life. So, like a stone thrown into a pond, a diagnosis ripples and it affects more than one person. So it doesn't affect one person. There is a lot of different people in your life that a diagnosis of a child can affect them as well. So we tend to think mostly about that child, and normally that child's maybe parents, but it also radiates out around. So we talk about grandparents dealing with a diagnosis of a grandchild and seeing how their life might be different. Siblings of a child with a diagnosis or a disability, that can harbor some guilt and resentment towards that child or that sibling. And so it's important that you not just understand that you have your own emotions to handle and deal with, but you also have the people around you. So if you have more than one person, like more than one child in your family, that you're also going to have to recognize that there may be something that you have to discuss with them as well. I think Rhonda wanted to jump in here and say something.
Okay, sorry, but I could not pass it up, Eileen. You probably figured that with the siblings. Because first and foremost, I'm a sibling. One of the things to be very aware of is that you may not put or intentionally put extra pressure and responsibility on the siblings intentionally, but many times siblings may feel that they need to compensate and do even more. And so we are, even if the child who's diagnosed is older or younger, it doesn't really matter. Many times, unintentionally, we go into a role that an adult role as siblings, and not that it is our responsibility. So really having the conversation and making sure that um, that our input and our worth in the family, not that anybody would do any different, is not based on what we do for our siblings. Is not because many times we may think that, well, if we do this, then that gives us more value in the family. And sometimes that's very hard, and none of that's intentional by anybody. But being very aware of, as you are going through these emotions, that the siblings are going to be impacted greatly, and making sure that we're not giving them additional responsibility that are adults' responsibilities. So I just think it's very important with that. We love one another and we want to help, but sometimes those lines get blurred, and it is not our responsibility as siblings to be the adults in the situation.
Thank you, Rhonda. Absolutely. That parentification of siblings is something that sometimes happens. And while it's not always intentional, it is important that as the adults in the room that we recognize that there's a difference between asking a child to grab a diaper for their sibling to help and help out and start actually taking care of a sibling, especially because something that we don't always talk about um, is the isolation that sometimes a disability diagnosis can have on a family and even isolate them from the support systems that are around them. It's not attention time, but if you think about, I can say from experience, like sometimes grandparents, if I have a child who is quite medically complex, I'm actually a registered nurse. We have a nurse take care of him during the day. And so while grandparents might have been a support system that I might have been looking forward to rely on, they no longer feel comfortable being able to take care of this child who's medically complex or has a disability that they don't understand themselves and how to treat and take care of them. So when we're talking about that, this is like ripples in a pond. It's not just that child. It's not just you as parent or caregiver. It's affecting a lot of people all surrounding this child. And it's not that that's a bad thing, but it's something that we just want to recognize and understand. So that way we can then move to make different types of coping mechanisms in place to off put that and also make sure that everyone who is in our pond, who is in that circle that might be affected, that they also know that it might affect them and that they're able to get the help that they may need to handle that type of disability and to know how to move forward. So, like we were talking about, it can be very isolating. It's very isolating sometimes when you have a child that has a diagnosis or has a disability, and to suddenly feel that there is no longer that support system that might have been there with other kids or that you were expecting to have, because not everyone understands everyone's disabilities and whatnot. So, reaching out for support is incredibly helpful because you're going to probably need to make a new support system. So before you can start talking to your child about how they're feeling, you need to make sure that you, as the adult in the room, that you have the support system that you need to handle it. They say you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's hard for you to reach out and help your child or help the ones around you if you're not able to get that help yourself. So there's lots of different ways that you can get that support. Peer-to-peer support is very beneficial because sometimes there's things that you can not talk to other family members about because maybe they don't have somebody with a particular disability. And talking to another family that's going through the same thing that you're going through is incredibly helpful. So peer-to-peer support, you can be talking to families, to parents, other parents or caregivers, and there's even sibling support groups out there. And that's a way that we talk about when Rhonda was saying that we don't want to put that parentification, that parental role onto the siblings, whether intentional or not, that there is ways for those children who do have a sibling with a disability that they have support for themselves with other children who are dealing with similar situations and instances. So everybody's going to deal with a diagnosis of a disability differently. There is no, like we said at the beginning, there is no one right way, there is no wrong way to handle it. But it's important to know that there is supports out there and that you are not alone, that there is lots of people all over the place that are willing to reach out and help and give you that support. So let's start with the why have this conversation. So to help the child or children to be a self-advocate, when children are empowered with knowledge, they can better advocate for themselves. We talk a lot about at Spin how we as the parents, we are not running this race. The child's running the race of life. They're running through, and we're just there to give them support and to coach. And so while they're younger, they may not be able to advocate for themselves, but at some point, a lot of children grow up, and then we need them to be able to have that self-advocacy skill. We want them to give them a chance to develop a positive self-image that includes their disability. If it is a lifelong disability, coming to terms with what that disability is, what that means to them, and how their life is going to look, is going to make it a lot easier the earlier that they come to terms with it and they discover how they feel about it. Hiding or sheltering children away from a diagnosis or even the word disability can lead to negative associations with that. You know, there's the questions that adults who have different disabilities were asked about when they were children. Did your parents talk to you about this? And when they said no, they had the questions themselves, like, were they embarrassed of me? Was my mom embarrassed that I had a disability and that's why she never said those words? Um, and then have you come to terms with all the words and the stigma that surround your child's disability? We'd like to think that we live in a world that we don't have to worry about those things, but we do. And are you putting forth a self-image for them that shows that they should be ashamed of this? Or is this something that they can just say it's a part of their lives and they can be proud of? Other reasons that you may want to have this conversation is that you want to give them accurate information. So younger children, they can make up reasons for their disability. Um, Sometimes younger children have magical thinking and they can make up reasons why they became disabled. Um, you know, Children that might be missing a limb or something like that can come up with fantastical ways of, oh, this is why my limb is missing or whatever the case may be. How long would you want them to continue to think that way? So do you want to give them that accurate information so that they understand what what that disability means and how it affects them and why it's happened? On the other end, you have older children. They can get inaccurate information from the internet or peers. So impressionable kids may take other people's word and not have all the correct information, which can also lead for them solidifying answers that just aren't correct. The internet is a wonderful thing and we love kids having peer support, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're sending them out into the world with the most accurate information about themselves so that they can self-advocate as time goes on. So, when to have this conversation? There is no right age. There's no time where we said that this is when you should sit down with your child and talk to them. Young adults with disabilities that weren't told or were sheltered from their diagnosis, a lot of them said they wish they had known sooner so they could come to terms with what that meant to them and how they handle it. Um, you want to make sure that when you use the language of the disability to let them know what's going on. So you don't want to shy away from factual terms because silence is where misinformation grows. You want to be prepared for the stigma that can follow a disability diagnosis. They may not understand right away, but you do want to make sure that you keep age appropriate. Um, so when you're talking to younger children, you want to make sure you're using age appropriate language. And this is an ongoing conversation. This isn't that you sit them down when they're 5 and say they have this disability and that's the end. You want to have this an ongoing conversation as they may have questions as they get older and things may change and how they understand how that disability affects their life. Everybody doesn't take in all the information in one time. And so they may need time to sit back and process it. And so this is something that you may be using and having this ongoing conversation for years with your child. So you want to research. Kids have questions. The better you understand the disability, the easier it's going to be for your child to understand. You want to give your child time to digest what's being said and time to ask questions. You can talk to them about what that disability means to them. And 2 days later, they may come back and go, yeah, I had a question about this. You want to try and make yourself prepared so that when they come up with those questions that you're not feeling like you need to scramble because you've already put in the time for the research so that way you can accurately answer those questions and give them answers that they can understand and that will help them self-realize. You also want to think about talking with members of the disability community. Many people who have disabilities, they're there to help others with their self-exploration journey. Um, Finding a support group, like we talked earlier, there's lots of different groups. We said parents, caregivers, siblings, grandparents, and finding a place where others know about your struggle or the different encounters that you may be having is uplifting and can be very helpful. So you just want to be prepared to have the conversation by being able to. I I always say, like, talking to one of my children was born deaf, and like a huge lift off of my shoulders when I was able to start speaking with people inside of the deaf and hard of hearing community because it wasn't oh, it was just so welcoming, and there was so much that I learned that it was incredibly empowering for me to be able to research and learn so I could know what to do for my child, and I could learn from others who are already having that lived experience. So with the conversation, you want to make sure that you're factual with it. We suggest using medically accurate words. Using flowery words can sometimes confuse what's going on. When we can name the disability and how it affects your child, they're going to be able to be empowered to advocate for themselves. You're going to use language at their level. I wouldn't tell a preschooler they had a brain bleed, and because of it, they have a learning disability. I have 2 children that did have brain bleeds and they have cerebral palsy. And so when they were small, we'd say, when you were a baby, you were very sick, you had a boo-boo in your head, and sometimes it makes your legs harder to use. And so as my child has gotten older, we're able to talk more about what that actually means to him. But you want to make sure that you're not talking over your child. You want this to be an empowering connection with them to talk about their disability and what you all can do together to advocate. You're going to want to encourage questions. Like we said before, it's an ongoing conversation. Not all questions and answers are going to happen in a single setting. You may want to make this a discussion with the whole family. Before you do something like that, you want to make sure that you and if you have a partner, that you're on the same page. This is with parenting with any child. You and your partner normally need to have at least the same ideas to be going on the same road together. But if you have conflicting information from parents, or caregivers, it can confuse the child onto what's going on. And so we want to try and make sure that this is a straightforward conversation and that all the facts are there so that everyone's on the same page. You are going to want to maybe show everybody in a positive light on how each family member is different. Sometimes when we were sitting down and talking with our family, we would make observations about the differences between just own siblings and differences in the people and how that makes them who they are. It doesn't make them better or worse. It's a part of who they are. You are going to want to stay positive. This isn't the time to dictate what their disability is going to maybe stop them from doing. That's not what this is. We want to be positive and uplifting. You may want to stay away from words that could make your child maybe interpret them as negative. So we think about avoiding derogatory terms. It can be difficult with some of these terms because as time goes on, we are becoming more mindful of other people and how we are describing things. So you want to research a little bit and maybe even talking to members of the community that you may be a part of now to see what is a good way to describe it. Sometimes like words like the high functioning and low functioning can be offensive. You try and avoid using words like severe because that sounds really judgmental. So maybe like there might be something significant. So it's not that you have severe cerebral palsy, you have cerebral palsy and it significantly affects different parts of your life. And so bringing it forward in that positive, uplifting fashion is the best way to go about it to try and give your child a positive outlook. Overcoming obstacles. So it's going to come up that with a lot of kids with disabilities that they're not able to do like all the other kids are that they see sometimes. So you want to frame their disability around what they can do. Um, this isn't to say that you're going to act like they're not going to have anything wrong, because you do want to acknowledge those difficulties. You want to validate those feelings that they may be having, um, because it makes it harder. So if something is harder, like my child has CP, and it makes it difficult for him to run because he's got spastic, and so his legs are really tight. And so we don't chastise them, say, why aren't you running as fast as you could be? No, you know what? You're right. It is more difficult for you to run. So we're going to have to work on stretching more. So it's something that we're not invalidating their feelings of difficulty or struggles that they have, but kind of reframing it into a way of how to say, yep, that is something that you have. Let's see how we can work around it. Let's see what we can do to make it the best that we can make it for you. There's websites, support groups, and finding other people with the similar disability and seeing how they overcome hardship is a great way to see, what could be in the future. What's something that your child can look to? Um, I'm honestly just thinking because we just had the Paralympics on, that was a really great way to see how even people with different disabilities that they are still able to compete in their own ways. And it was a wonderful way to show children who have similar circumstances of all the things that they can accomplish and that they can do to keep that positive light when you're talking to them. So again, we're going to frame the disability around what they can do. We're going to focus on their strength. This disability or the diagnosis, whatever they call it, it does not define what you are capable in life. They are a person first. The disability is just a small part of it. It does not make that person into that one little corner now that they have that diagnosis or that label attached to them. They can accomplish whatever dreams they set forth, that their voice matters when they're talking, that it's not the grown-ups in the room talking about them. They are a part of this conversation. This is their life, and they need to learn how to advocate for themselves. And by doing so, they're able to accomplish what they need. This is your life, and with self-determination, they can accomplish amazing things. So this was a lot of information. at the end here, there was a woman, a female case, and she's a mother of a child with Down syndrome. And somebody was asking her, what's it like to have a child with Down syndrome? So back in 1987, she wrote this down, and it's just a little story, and I think it's nice. So we're going to read it. Um, I am often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability, to try and help people who have not shared that unique experience to understand it, imagine how it would feel. It's like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make wonderful plans. The Colosseum, the Michelangelo, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands and the flight attendant comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean, Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life, I've dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language. And you will meet a whole new group of people that you would have never met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy. It's less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills and Holland has tulips and Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone that you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, yes, that's where I was supposed to go. And that's what I had planned. And the pain of that will never, ever, ever, ever go away because the loss of that dream is a very, very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to go to Italy, you may never feel free to enjoy the very special and the very lovely things that there are about Holland. So I know this was a little quick because it's a lot of information, but it's a lot of very heavy information. So this is some of the places we went to for resources. I think I'm going to hand it back over to Amber to see if we have any questions or anything else we'd like to discuss.
Thanks, Eileen. That was great. So at this time, I am going to go over our ending slide. Please feel free to utilize that chat function or question and answer box if there is something that you would like to share or ask before we close today. As you see on the screen, we do have a QR code as well as an evaluation link that's been placed in our chat. Excuse me. We ask that you fill our evaluation out because we want to make sure we're reaching as many folks across our state as possible. We want to make sure that the information that we're providing to you is meaningful to you. We want to hear your thoughts. What would you like to hear more of? Maybe there's a specific request. Please let us know. Once the evaluation link has been utilized, a certificate of attendance will be emailed directly to you. And then also you will be receiving a follow-up email with all links provided today during the training. And we ask you to visit our website to sign up to future events. You can visit www.kyspin.com. And maybe you're looking for some individual resources or support. Please feel free to phone us. You can check out our social media and contact us through that. And all of our webinars and trainings are listed on our website as well as our YouTube channel. We encourage you to check that out. I do not see any questions or comments in either of our functions. So at this time, we want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with us. And we hope to see you soon at our next event.